All right, so my presentation is using assessment data to drive personalized learning. For my assessment strategy, I am going to be using a pre-assessment on Unit 3 for U.S. History, which is a new nation, that covers the first 5 presidents and various reforms. With any of our assessments at our school, we use a program called All-in Learning. It is a district-funded dashboard, so to speak, where we upload our answers to our assessments, and we can attach any standards that we use for that. And after the students take their tests, their bubble sheets are scanned into this platform, and the missed questions are categorized by standard, by student, by class, and we as a curriculum team are able to look at those missed questions accordingly. For this unit in particular, it is covered as normal using lessons developed by the curriculum team, but to assess the learning needs of each individual student, we will group the assessment by standard so we can focus on those specific standards that individual students need mastery of. To do this, after the pre-assessment is taken, they will engage in our next district-funded learning management system that is called Desire to Learn. And with Desire to Learn, it is a learning management system that affords teachers a lot of opportunities to address many different learning styles. But for this particular formative assessment tool, we're going to be using the content and the conditional release option to conditionally release quizzes after a Dropbox assignment is completed. And within the conditional release quiz, it'll be a combination of a multiple choice and short answer quiz, depending on how many times a student has to engage in the remediation activity. Quiz data will be collected by the teacher and analyzed accordingly. And once this is completed, the teacher will move on the students to engage in the Kahoot challenge once mastery of that standard or standards has been shown. The Kahoot challenge is an overall formative assessment game that many of our students like and many of our teachers currently utilize in their classroom. It will cover questions across the entire unit just to make sure that students are engaged in understanding all of the standards that are covered within that unit. And this can be completed as many times, as quickly, as slow as students want to take, but it's just an extra remediation tool that they can use to help them be successful. Lastly, the post-assessment will be delivered and data analysis will be conducted comparing the pre-assessment scores and the post-assessment scores, and for each individual student, those standards will be covered. As I stated earlier, the technology that will be used is Desire to Learn. It's our LMS that is for each class period, and teachers have the opportunity to either use it as a whole group instruction or can be as specific for personalized learning. But it will be specifically utilized for remediation for this particular assessment strategy. Second tool is the Kahoot. Kahoot currently can be used as an in-class activity, as a review game that just pits students against each other to see who can get the correct answer the quickest. But it can also be given to individual students via a link, and they use the app to put in a code. And this is the challenge option that we will use for this. It gives individual students a formative assessment tool that they can use at their own discretion, at their own pace. It's the same review questions. However, it is, again, there's no time limit, and it gives the students the correct answers for them to know what will be on their post-assessment. But these tools both can be used to provide a unique remediation opportunity for students to master those standards that they need to be successful. For student A, we're going to give the example of a visual impairment. For this assessment strategy, students will be provided a large print pre-assessment. The results will be cataloged within All in Learning. Once they complete this pre-assessment, they will be given the missed standards, and they will then proceed to go into D2L and complete the remediation activity. What is great about D2L is with any technology tool, students can enlarge the text as needed. D2L also affords students the ability to do text-to-speech, and that is automatically embedded by the district. But as students complete those remediation activities, in this case, it's a remediation guide with reading questions. Once they complete those reading guide questions, they'll submit it to the Dropbox, and then that will conditionally release a multiple choice quiz question. Once they complete those quiz questions, that data will be compared with the pre-assessment score. If that pre-assessment score remains to be higher than that quiz, and the pre-assessment score is broken down by the same standards that are missed. So given that score versus the quiz score, if that score is lower, students will have to go through the remediation again, and then instead of a multiple choice quiz, it'll be a short answer quiz. But these quiz results will be uploaded into the grade book as a quiz grade. So that is if a student is unsuccessful in the first attempt. If a student is successful in the first attempt or is also successful in the second attempt, they will continue with the Kahoot challenge that covers all the what we call AKS, academic knowledge and skill standards, for that unit assessment. And again, this can be completed as their own discretion and as frequently as needed to review. For student B, they're given extended time accommodations. So on the pre and post assessment, students will be given extended time to complete those activities. Students will log into their eClass page, also known as D2L, to complete those AKS strands that they need to show mastery, and they can complete this at their own pace as well. For the remediation quizzes, you can also give extended time on those, and the student will receive those extended time accommodations for that. The same rules apply as the previous student. If they show mastery on that multiple choice quiz compared to the pre-assessment standards, they will move on to the Kahoot challenge. But if not, then they will be asked to engage in the remediation again and then do a short answer quiz for that. Lastly, student C is checking work frequently. The student will be provided the pre-assessment. They'll be provided the missed standards, and they'll engage in the remediation activity. What makes it different for this student, however, is after every 5 questions they complete in that remediation, they will go to the teacher, and the teacher will check their work to provide any additional assistance if needed to ensure that they understand what is being asked on those remediation questions. Once that is completed, students will engage in that remediation multiple choice quiz, and again, the same thing applies. If they show mastery, they'll move on to the Kahoot challenge, but if not, then they'll engage in the remediation. For this student, they'll ask the teacher if they're confused on anything. The teacher will make sure that they understand what the questions are asking and what the content is trying to show. They will then do the short answer quiz. Those scores will be compared, and then they will proceed to the post-assessment. This assessment strategy measures the learning, because instead of a pre-assessment followed by some quizzes while the classroom instruction is given, followed by post-assessment, this ensures that individual specific standards that are missed are given to that student, to each individual student. So the pre-assessment will provide that individualized data based on the most needed standards that need remediation for that specific student. The modules will be created remediating the standards in groups. It is not subcategories of those standards, but overarching themes of those standards. So you would say maybe parent standards to those subcategories. Students will not be able to complete quizzes until the reading guide questions are completed and submitted to the Dropbox. Quiz data will be gathered and compared to pre-assessment scores to those adjacent AKS strands. In other words, the whole pre-assessment score will not be taken into consideration. It'll only be those standards that are categorized according to All-in Learning. That is what will be compared. If no progress is shown, students will repeat the readings and teacher will guide students through the answers to the reading guide questions. And then they will then proceed to the short answer quiz. And again, the Kahoot challenge will be used to further reinforce all of the AKS that is on that pre and post assessment to ensure that students master those standards. Lastly, the post assessment, obviously hoping that the students will gain mastery of those missed standards. The post assessment will then be compared to the pre-assessment to see if this strategy shows growth and to see if this strategy is successful. Here's the rubric. On the left side of the first column, you see the student mastery of standards, and those are the standards that apply to that unit. Accordingly, each column is insufficient success, minimal success, adequate success, and extensive success, or we could say growth. Positive growth would be the extensive category. That is each AKS students. In order for them to have extensive growth, students complete the reading guide and the quiz. They show positive growth on either of the, whether it's multiple choice or short answer quiz. Compared to the pre-assessment score, student does engage in that Kahoot challenge, and post-assessment grade shows exponential growth compared to the pre-assessment. Insufficient would be student does not engage in any of the remediation activities. Minimal is they would engage in the reading guide and quiz, but they fail to show growth on either quiz as compared to the pre-assessment score. Adequate mastery would show that students complete the reading guide and the quiz, show positive growth, but they do not engage in the Kahoot challenge that covers all of the standards for that unit, which is still needed for the student to show mastery for that unit. Lastly, for next steps, how technology will assist with data analysis. As I stated earlier, All-in Learning is a district-funded application that uses the curriculum team as really a professional learning community. But it groups student scores by standard if those standards are input into the system manually. It also groups students and scores per class and as a team as a whole. But this helps the teachers know whether or not a standard was not achieved based on the lesson that was covered, because most teachers in each curriculum team teach around the same general thing, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. But teachers can ensure that their lessons are covering standards and the depth of knowledge is covered accordingly. Desire to Learn, or D2L, consolidates the quiz scores, and teachers can view missed answers, and students can as well. And that's another remediation tool. Lastly, the Kahoot challenge submits those scores to the teacher for clarification on any missed questions and address any question answer validity. With Kahoot, teachers submit their own questions and answer choices. And if there's a discrepancy with any of these, it will show according to the scores that all students get. If there's a low score that all students get, it may be a validity issue with the question that is asked. But these technologies ensure that the teacher is giving the most accurate and valid information, and it also ensures that all students, regardless of ability and disability, are given the opportunity to master all of the standards. Here are my references. Thank you so much for listening.